After the shootout, town gave a cowboy an Apache woman, but he chose another path. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty streets of Red Rock. The small frontier town had seen little excitement in recent months, but that morning, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. He rode with quiet confidence, his wide-brimmed hat tilted slightly down to shield his eyes from the glaring sun. Dust swirled around his boots as he guided his horse along the main road. The townspeople, mostly farmers and shopkeepers, paused to watch, their curiosity piqued. Nobody recognized the man, yet there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was no ordinary traveler. His name was Samuel. He had been on the trail for months, moving from one small town to another, taking odd jobs where he could find them. Sometimes he worked on ranches, tending cattle or mending fences. Other times he helped transport goods across the rugged terrain. He was a quiet man, preferring solitude over conversation, but there was an unspoken strength in the way he approached life. Samuel had grown up on a farm in the Midwest, learning the value of hard work and the importance of keeping one's word. The frontier had taught him even more: how to read the weather, how to care for a horse, and how to stay alert when danger was near. Red Rock was a typical frontier town, with a few wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, and a small sheriff's office. The town had always been on the edge of the lawless territories, and the people had grown accustomed to occasional trouble. Rumors of a gang that had been terrorizing neighboring towns had reached Red Rock, and many locals whispered anxiously about what might happen if the outlaws ever arrived. Despite these fears, life went on. Children played along the streets, shopkeepers opened their doors, and ranchers drove their cattle to nearby pastures. Samuel dismounted his horse in front of the general store, tying the reins to a post. He glanced around the town, observing everything with careful eyes. He noticed the nervous tension in some of the townsfolk, the cautious glances they cast toward the horizon, and the way the sheriff kept his hand near his revolver. Samuel was used to this atmosphere. On the trail, he had learned to anticipate trouble, and he understood that a quiet man with skills could sometimes prevent more harm than a loud one with no experience. Inside the general store, the air smelled of flour, coffee, and leather. Samuel approached the counter and greeted the storekeeper politely. "Morning," he said, his voice calm but firm. The man nodded, offering a wary smile. "Not many strangers come through here," the storekeeper replied. "What brings you to Red Rock?" "Looking for work," Samuel said simply. "I can tend cattle, mend fences, or help with deliveries. Whatever is needed." Atba. Storekeeper studied him for a moment. "Well, we could always use a hand around here. Things have been tense with those outlaws roaming nearby. You might find yourself doing more than just work if trouble comes." Samuel only nodded. He had faced danger before and was not easily intimidated. What worried him more than the outlaws was the effect they might have on innocent people. He had seen too many towns destroyed and too many families suffer because of lawless men who thought the world owed them something. Samuel believed that a man could make a difference by acting decisively and with courage, even if it meant risking his own safety. After stocking up on supplies, some flour, dried meat, and coffee, Samuel made his way outside. The sun was higher now, and the town seemed to take on a more ordinary appearance. But Samuel's sharp eyes caught subtle signs of unease: a broken fence post near the edge of town, footprints that did not belong to local residents, and a group of children quickly retreating to the safety of their homes when they spotted him. It was a town on edge, and Samuel knew that the calm would not last long. A call wandered toward the outskirts where the ranches began, watching the cattle graze in the wide fields. The fences were in decent shape, but some were weak and needed repair. Samuel spent the afternoon working on them, his hands rough from the labor but steady and sure. The ranchers watched from a distance, impressed by the quiet efficiency with which he handled each task. Even the children peeked from behind haystacks, curious about the stranger who moved like he belonged but clearly did not. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Samuel had finished his work. He paused, taking in the vast landscape that stretched beyond the town. Rolling hills, rocky outcrops, and distant forests created a scenery both beautiful and unforgiving. Out here, survival depended on skill, patience, and respect for the land. Samuel had learned these lessons early, and he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing he could handle whatever the frontier might throw at him. As night fell, Samuel returned to the town, stopping briefly at the saloon. The wooden sign creaked in the wind as he entered. Inside, a few tired men played cards, while others sipped whiskey, discussing rumors of the gang that had been haunting nearby areas. The saloon keeper nodded at Samuel, recognizing a man who could hold his own. Samuel ordered a simple meal and listened quietly, absorbing the stories and gossip. He did not speak much, but his presence alone commanded respect. By the time he left the saloon, the town was quiet. Lamps flickered along the wooden sidewalks, and the air carried a hint of chill. Samuel walked slowly, aware that his arrival had not gone unnoticed. The townsfolk were watching, some with hope, others with suspicion. They did not yet know the depth of his skills or the strength of his character, but they sensed that this cowboy was different. He was not there for fame or fortune. He was there to live honestly and, if needed, to act when courage was required. Samuel returned to the small boarding house on the edge of town where he would sleep. He brushed the dust from his clothes and took care of his horse, feeding it and letting it rest. Sitting by the window, he looked out at the darkened streets of Red Rock, thinking about what lay ahead. He knew that danger was never far in these parts, and that sometimes a single man could change the course of events for an entire town. Samuel felt a quiet determination settle within him. He was ready for whatever challenges the frontier might bring, yet he also understood that life here required more than just strength. It required judgment, respect, and a deep understanding of people. As he drifted off to sleep, Samuel could hear the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of the wind through the dry grass, and the occasional creak of a horse's harness. Red Rock was a town waiting for its destiny, and Samuel had arrived at exactly the right moment. He would soon find that heroism is not just about guns or speed, but about decisions, integrity, and knowing when to act. And for Samuel, the real test of his character was only just beginning. The morning sun rose slowly over Red Rock, painting the town in soft shades of gold. Samuel was already awake, tending to his horse in the small stable behind the boarding house. The animal had settled quickly in this quiet town, and Samuel felt a calm sense of routine as he brushed its coat and checked its harness. But beneath the peaceful exterior, a tension lingered in the air. The townsfolk were restless, and Samuel could sense the worry in their eyes. He walked toward the town square, observing the usual morning activity. Shopkeepers opened their doors, children ran about with laughter that seemed to fight against the heavy anxiety hanging in the streets, and ranchers led their cattle toward the pastures. Samuel noticed the subtle signs that trouble might come: a loose gate swinging in the wind, a broken wheel on a cart left unattended, and more than a few worried glances cast toward the horizon. Out here, a calm morning could turn dangerous in a single hour. The sheriff of Red Rock, a grizzled man named Tucker, was already standing in front of the small office, watching the distant hills with narrowed eyes. He nodded at Samuel as the cowboy approached. "Morning," he said. "I don't know if you noticed, but we might be in for a rough day. That gang that's been causing trouble. Word is, they're heading this way. Could be sooner than we think." Samuel listened carefully. He had heard stories of the gang during his travels, men who stole, burned, and intimidated without mercy. But he had faced danger before and knew that fear alone never solved anything. "I've handled trouble before," Samuel replied quietly. "If they come, we'll deal with it." Sheriff Tucker gave a grim smile. "I like the sound of that. We could use a steady hand. But remember, it's not just about shooting. It's about protecting the people, keeping them safe." As the morning passed, the townsfolk went about their routines, but there was an undercurrent of nervousness. Samuel helped a few farmers repair fences near the edge of town and assisted in moving a small herd of cattle to a safer pasture. Every now and then he glanced toward the hills, scanning for any sign of the gang. His senses, honed over years on the trail, told him something was approaching. By mid-afternoon, dark shapes appeared on the horizon. Samuel squinted and saw a group of men riding fast, dust rising behind them. The gang had arrived. Panic rippled through Red Rock. People rushed to secure their homes while shopkeepers barred their doors. The children were pulled inside by frightened parents. Samuel, calm and ready, moved toward the town square, where the sheriff and a few of the bravest townsfolk had gathered. The gang rode into Red Rock with reckless speed, shouting and firing warning shots. Their leader, a tall man with a scarred face, waved his pistol and demanded attention. "This town belongs to us now," he shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. The townsfolk froze, but Samuel stepped forward, positioning himself where he could act decisively. He didn't speak much, he never did, but his eyes and posture conveyed confidence and readiness. Samuel had learned that courage is not shown by shouting or threatening, but by acting with clarity when the moment comes. He watched the gang carefully, noting their movements, the way they held their weapons, and the way they communicated with each other. Every detail mattered. The first shot rang out, breaking the tense silence. Samuel reacted instantly, moving with precision and skill. His first bullet struck the leader's horse, causing it to stumble and throwing the rider off balance. The gang was momentarily startled, giving the townsfolk a chance to find cover. Samuel continued, firing with accuracy that left no room for error. Every move was calculated, ensuring the least harm to the innocent people around him. The townsfolk, seeing Samuel's skill, began to rally. Some helped by guiding women and children to safety. Others retrieved rifles and positioned themselves strategically. Samuel coordinated quietly, using hand signals and brief gestures to direct the defense. Though he had come to Red Rock seeking peace, he now found himself at the center of a conflict that would decide the fate of the town. The shootout continued for nearly an hour. Samuel remained calm even as bullets flew and dust filled the streets. His focus was not on glory, but on protecting the people. One by one, the outlaws were disarmed or forced to retreat. Samuel moved through the chaos with surprising speed, taking cover when necessary, but never abandoning the civilians who had no way to protect themselves. Eventually, the gang realized they could not overpower the determined townsfolk, led by Samuel's steady hand. They retreated, fleeing back toward the hills from which they had come. The town erupted in cautious celebration. People emerged from their homes, brushing dust from their clothes and checking on neighbors. Sheriff Tucker approached Samuel, his face lined with relief and admiration. "You did it," the sheriff said simply. "You saved this town. I don't know what we would have done without you." Samuel shook his head, refusing praise. "It wasn't just me," he said. "Everyone did their part. The people here stood together. That's what kept the town safe." Despite his modesty, the townsfolk were eager to show their gratitude. They gathered in the town square, offering Samuel food, drink, and kind words. But among the crowd, there was a deeper plan forming. The town elders, following a tradition meant to honor heroes, insisted that Samuel should choose a bride from among the local women. Their reasoning was simple. A brave man who had saved the town deserved recognition, and marriage was a gift of gratitude they believed he should accept. Among the women they suggested was Naeli, an Apache woman whose family had lived nearby for generations. She was intelligent, strong, and had survived hardships that had shaped her into a resilient young woman. The town assumed Samuel would accept quickly, believing it was his reward for bravery. But Samuel had never taken a decision lightly. He respected people, their freedom and their choices, and he knew that offering a woman as a prize, no matter how well-intentioned, was not right unless she also wanted it. As the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long, Samuel observed Naeli from a distance. She carried herself with quiet strength, her eyes aware of the world and its dangers. He sensed her wariness and her independence. Samuel understood that she had already endured much, and that her life was hers to control. He resolved to meet her with respect, to learn about her thoughts and feelings rather than treating her as a symbol of victory. That evening, the town gathered for a small celebration marking the survival of Red Rock. Samuel stood quietly, letting the townsfolk express their gratitude, while he considered his next steps. He was aware that the choices he made in the coming days could affect not just himself but also Naeli and the community as a whole. He had acted bravely in the shootout, but now courage would require patience, wisdom, and a sense of fairness. As night fell, Samuel returned to his boarding house, exhausted but resolute. He had faced danger and emerged unscathed, yet he understood that true heroism was more than skill with a gun. It was about protecting the innocent, making ethical choices, and respecting the lives of others. Samuel had saved the town, but the real test of character was only beginning. He lay awake that night, thinking about the events of the day. The shootout had tested his nerves, his skill, and his judgment. But he also considered the lives he had impacted, the women and children he had protected, and the responsibility that came with his actions. Samuel understood that the frontier was not just a place of danger and adventure. It was a place where choices mattered, where honor and respect could define a person's legacy. The stars shone bright over Red Rock, casting a quiet light on the town and its people. Samuel, though weary, felt a sense of purpose. He had arrived in this town seeking work and peace, yet he had been called upon to act with courage. And though the danger had passed for now, he knew that life on the frontier was unpredictable. Every decision, every action, could change the course of the future for many lives. Samuel drifted into sleep with a calm resolve. He had proven his skill and bravery, but he had also recognized the importance of respect, fairness, and the choices of others. The events of that day would ripple through the town for years to come, remembered not just for the fight against the outlaws, but also for the integrity and wisdom shown by the lone cowboy who had arrived quietly but left a lasting impact. The morning after the shootout, Red Rock was quieter than usual. The town was still recovering from the events of the previous day. Windows were being cleaned, fences repaired, and the streets swept of dust and debris. Despite the relief that the gang had been driven away, a sense of anticipation lingered in the air. Everyone knew that the arrival of Samuel, the lone cowboy who had saved them, had changed the rhythm of the town. Samuel rose early, as he always did. He attended to his horse, feeding it oats and brushing its coat until it gleamed. Then he walked slowly through the town, observing the people as they went about their chores. The townsfolk greeted him with nods and quiet smiles. Some whispered words of thanks, while others lingered at a distance, unsure how to express their gratitude. Samuel accepted these gestures with humility. He did not seek attention, but he understood the power of kindness and recognition. Word had spread quickly that Samuel had single-handedly defended the town. The elders, men who had lived in Red Rock all their lives, began discussing what should be done to honor him. They spoke of a tradition, one that had been practiced for generations. When a man demonstrated bravery and protected the community, he could be offered a bride as a symbol of respect and appreciation. This was not simply about reward. It was about ensuring that a hero could build a life with someone of equal standing in the town. Among the women the elders considered was Nayeli, a young Apache woman who lived on the outskirts of Red Rock. Nayeli's family had been in the area for many years, known for their wisdom, strength, and deep connection to the land. Nayeli herself had experienced hardship, having lost family members to raids and the unpredictable dangers of frontier life. Yet she had grown into a confident, independent woman. Her intelligence, courage, and calm presence made her admired by those who knew her. When Samuel was informed of the town's proposal, he felt a mixture of surprise and unease. He had never considered marriage as a reward, nor did he wish to make a decision on behalf of another person. Samuel believed deeply in respect, fairness, and personal choice. He understood that a marriage without mutual consent would not honor Nayeli, nor would it align with his own principles. Still, he agreed to meet her, knowing that an honest conversation was the only way forward. Nayeli, upon hearing the news, was cautious. She had seen men who thought bravery entitled them to whatever they desired, and she did not intend to be treated as a prize. Yet she also understood the town's intentions and recognized that Samuel's actions had saved many lives, including those of her friends and neighbors. She agreed to meet him, though her demeanor remained reserved and wary. Their first meeting took place in the town square, beneath the shade of a large oak tree. Samuel approached slowly, tipping his hat in a polite greeting. "Good morning," he said. "I wanted to speak with you personally rather than through others." Nayeli studied him carefully, her eyes steady and thoughtful. "I appreciate that," she replied, "but I want you to know that I am not here as a reward, and I will not be treated as one. I have my own life, and I make my own choices." Samuel nodded. "I understand completely. That is why I am speaking with you directly. I will not ask anything of you that you do not want to give. I respect your life and your decisions." For a long moment they stood in silence, observing each other. Samuel noted Nayeli's calm strength, the way she carried herself with confidence and dignity. Nayeli, in turn, recognized Samuel's sincerity. She saw in him a man who had acted bravely, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. The townsfolk watched from a distance, curious and impatient. Many had assumed that Samuel would accept the town's offer immediately, but they began to sense that this cowboy was different. He was not a man to be swayed by tradition or expectation. He valued respect and personal choice above all else. Over the next several days, Samuel and Nayeli spent time together, speaking about their experiences, their hopes, and the challenges they had faced. Samuel learned about Nayeli's life, the hardships she had endured, the lessons she had learned from her family, and her deep connection to her community. Nayeli discovered that Samuel was not only skilled with a gun, but also thoughtful, reflective, and guided by a strong moral compass. They shared stories of the frontier, the dangers they had faced, and the importance of integrity in a land where lawlessness often prevailed. The more they spoke, the more Samuel understood that offering or accepting marriage as a reward would be wrong. Nayeli's life was hers to direct, and any decision regarding her future must come from her own heart. Likewise, Nayeli recognized that Samuel's respect for her autonomy was rare. Many men she had encountered would have assumed the town's gift entitled them to whatever they desired. Samuel, however, treated her as an equal, valuing her choices and opinions above all else. The town elders, observing these interactions, began to understand that Samuel's approach was unlike anything they had expected. They realized that bravery and heroism were not always rewarded in traditional ways. Sometimes true courage lay in doing the right thing, even when it went against custom or popular opinion. As days passed, Samuel continued to assist the town, helping repair fences, guiding cattle, and offering advice to the sheriff. Nayeli joined him on occasion, sharing her knowledge of the land, the weather, and the ways of the local community. Their relationship developed naturally, based on mutual respect and shared understanding, rather than obligation or expectation. Despite the town's pressure, Samuel never wavered in his principle. He made it clear that he would not accept a woman as a reward, no matter how well-intentioned the offer. Nayeli, in turn, expressed appreciation for his honesty and respect, recognizing that their connection was built on trust rather than tradition. The townsfolk slowly began to accept Samuel's decision, understanding that his courage was not measured solely by actions in battle, but also by the integrity with which he treated others. One afternoon, Samuel and Nayeli walked along the outskirts of Red Rock, observing the fields and hills beyond. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of wild grasses and distant pine. They spoke quietly, sharing thoughts and stories that deepened their understanding of one another. Samuel admired Nayeli's wisdom and resilience, while Nayeli respected Samuel's courage and moral clarity. In that quiet moment, both realized that respect and choice were far more important than tradition or reward. They did not need a formal arrangement to acknowledge the connection they shared. Their bond was built on mutual understanding, trust, and the shared experience of facing challenges in a harsh and unpredictable world. By the end of the week, the town had come to terms with Samuel's decision. The elders acknowledged his bravery and contributions in other ways, through recognition, thanks, and public acknowledgement of his heroism. Nayeli returned to her daily life, empowered by the knowledge that her choices were respected and valued. Samuel continued his work in the town, respected not only for his skill in the shootout but also for his wisdom, patience, and moral strength. As the sun set over Red Rock, painting the town in warm hues of orange and gold, Samuel reflected on the past days. He had faced danger and acted with courage, saving the town from harm. But he had also learned that true heroism extended beyond physical skill. It was about making the right decisions, respecting others, and understanding that every life mattered. Samuel felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had acted with integrity and honor. In the end, the bond between Samuel and Nayeli was not defined by reward or expectation. It was defined by respect, mutual understanding, and the recognition of each person's autonomy. Both had faced challenges and dangers, yet they had emerged with their dignity intact and a deeper appreciation for the choices that shape one's life. Red Rock would remember Samuel not only as a cowboy who saved the town from danger, but also as a man of principle whose actions set an example of courage, integrity, and respect. Nayeli would remember the encounter as a moment in which her autonomy was honored and her wisdom and strength were recognized. Together, their story became a quiet reminder to the people of the frontier that bravery and respect are inseparable, and that true heroism is measured not just in actions, but in the principles that guide them. The days passed quietly in Red Rock, though the air was still thick with curiosity. Everyone in the town wanted to know what Samuel would do next. After the shootout and his respectful conversations with Nayeli, the townsfolk had grown to admire him even more. Yet, many also felt impatient. They had seen the tradition followed for generations. A hero who saved the town would accept a bride chosen for him. They assumed Samuel's decision would be simple, a formality after his bravery. But Samuel knew that nothing about this situation was simple. He had faced danger with precision and courage during the shootout, yet that had been a matter of skill and timing. This choice, the choice of whether to accept a bride, was about respect, ethics, and human dignity. Samuel had never taken someone else's life or future lightly. He understood that marriage was not a prize or reward. It was a lifelong commitment between two people who chose each other freely. To accept the town's gift without Nayeli's genuine consent would dishonor both of them. That morning, the elders approached Samuel in the town square, carrying a small basket of gifts as a gesture of gratitude. "Samuel," one of the men said, "we all admire your courage and skill. You saved Red Rock, and the town wants to honor you. We ask that you accept this tradition and choose a bride from among us. Nayeli is an exceptional woman, strong and capable. We believe this union would benefit everyone." Samuel bowed slightly, but remained calm. "I appreciate your gratitude," he replied, "but I cannot accept someone as a reward. Marriage must come from choice, not obligation or expectation. Nayeli is not property, nor is any woman. Her life is her own, and I will respect that above all else." Some looked puzzled, while others were concerned about the message this might send. "Are you saying you refuse to honor the town's tradition?" one elder asked cautiously. Samuel nodded. "I honor the town's gratitude, yes, but not in this way. There are other ways to recognize bravery and service, ways that do not involve taking someone's freedom away. My actions yesterday were meant to protect the people of Red Rock, not to gain a reward." Word spread quickly through the town. Some townsfolk were disappointed, feeling that the tradition was being ignored. Others began to admire Samuel even more, recognizing that his courage extended beyond skill with a gun. It was also moral courage. He had chosen principle over convenience, respect over expectation. Meanwhile, Nayeli observed from a distance. She had heard the discussions and understood Samuel's stance. Many men would have accepted without question, seeing her as a symbol of gratitude or as part of a tradition. But Samuel had done something rare. He treated her as an equal, acknowledging her choices and her autonomy. Nayeli felt a quiet respect for the cowboy who had risked his life to protect the town and now showed the same care for the lives and decisions of others. Over the next few days, Samuel continued his work in the town, assisting with repairs, helping ranchers, and sharing knowledge about the land and safety. He remained humble, refusing to boast about his role in the shootout. The townsfolk slowly began to see that his bravery was not about recognition or reward. It was about protecting people and acting with integrity. Nayeli joined him on several occasions, showing him paths through the hills, teaching him about the plants and wildlife, and sharing stories of her family and community. Their conversations were filled with mutual respect and curiosity. Samuel listened attentively, never assuming he knew better. Nayeli spoke freely, expressing her opinions and concerns, and Samuel responded with thoughtful consideration. The bond that developed between them was not based on tradition or expectation. It was built on trust, respect, and understanding. Some townsfolk questioned Samuel's decision. "Why not accept the offer?" one man asked. "It's the way things are done. The town will respect you more if you agree." Samuel shook his head. "Respect is not gained by taking someone else's freedom. True honor comes from doing what is right, even when it is unpopular. Nayeli deserves the chance to choose her own path, just as I must choose mine." This was a lesson not only for Samuel, but also for the people of Red Rock. They had relied on tradition for generations, sometimes without questioning its fairness or impact. Samuel's decision challenged them to consider that bravery and honor could be expressed in many ways, not just through adherence to old customs. One afternoon, Samuel and Naeli walked along the outskirts of town, overlooking the rolling hills and fields beyond. The sun was warm on their backs, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wild flowers and dry grass. Samuel spoke quietly, his voice thoughtful. "I did not come here seeking recognition," he said. "I came to live honestly, to work, and to protect those who could not protect themselves. The town's gratitude is appreciated, but it cannot come at the cost of your freedom or mine." Naeli nodded. "I understand, Samuel. Many would have accepted the offer without thinking. But you have shown me respect. That is rare and meaningful. You have saved the town, and you have honored the people by treating them and me fairly. That matters more than any reward." The conversation left both of them with a deep sense of understanding. They realized that the bond forming between them did not require formal recognition or tradition. It was built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and personal integrity. They did not need a ceremony or public approval to know that their actions and choices were aligned with their values. As the days went on, the town began to embrace a new understanding of what it meant to honor bravery. They recognized that Samuel's courage was not only in facing danger, but in making difficult ethical decisions. The elders began to speak openly about how traditions could evolve, emphasizing respect, consent, and fairness alongside recognition and gratitude. Samuel continued to live simply in Red Rock, assisting wherever he could. He helped the children with chores, guided travelers through the surrounding hills, and taught the ranchers safer ways to manage their cattle. His quiet presence brought stability and reassurance to a town that had recently faced fear and uncertainty. Naeli continued her work in her community, strengthened by the knowledge that her choices were respected and valued. Over time, the story of Samuel's decision spread beyond Red Rock. Travelers spoke of the cowboy who had defended a town and then refused to take a woman as a reward. They admired his bravery, his skill, and most importantly, his integrity. Samuel became known not only for his sharpshooting but for his moral courage, a rare quality in a frontier world often defined by violence and tradition. By the end of the week, Samuel's choice had become a quiet lesson for Red Rock. The townsfolk realized that heroism could take many forms. It was not always about winning fights or following tradition. Sometimes it was about respecting others, making ethical choices, and standing by one's principles, even when it went against popular expectation. As the sun set over the town, casting long shadows across the streets, Samuel reflected on the past days. He had faced danger and acted with courage. He had met Naeli and treated her with respect. He had made a decision that was not popular, but was right. And in doing so, he had taught a town the value of integrity, respect, and the importance of personal choice. Naeli, observing him from her own path home, felt a sense of admiration and trust. Samuel's actions had shown her that strength was not only measured by physical ability but by the courage to do what was right, even when it was difficult. Their connection, built on honesty and respect, was stronger than any obligation imposed by tradition. In the quiet of the evening, Red Rock settled into a calm that had been absent for too long. The town had survived danger, learned important lessons, and recognized that bravery was more than skill with a gun. It was character, integrity, and respect for others. Samuel had proven that true courage could be found not only in moments of battle, but also in moments of moral clarity. As night fell, Samuel prepared for the days ahead, knowing that life on the frontier would continue to test him. But he also knew that he had made the right choice. He had acted with honor, defended the town, and respected the autonomy of another human being. And in that he found a quiet satisfaction that no reward or recognition could match. The morning air in Red Rock was crisp, carrying the scent of dust and distant wildflowers. Samuel packed his few belongings carefully, checking that his horse was ready for the journey ahead. He had decided it was time to leave the town. Though the people had grown fond of him and he had gained their respect, he understood that his life belonged on the trail. Samuel had always been a man who valued freedom and movement, and he knew that staying too long in one place would change him in ways he was not yet ready to accept. As he prepared to depart, townsfolk gathered to see him off. The children ran ahead, waving small hands, and adults nodded with smiles and quiet admiration. Some lingered, unsure whether they should offer words of thanks or simply watch him ride away. Samuel approached the town square one last time, looking over the buildings, the fences, and the people he had helped protect. He felt a quiet satisfaction. He had done his duty, and he had acted with integrity. Nayeli approached him quietly. She had come to the square, walking steadily and with calm confidence. "Samuel," she said softly, "I wanted to see you before you leave. I respect the choices you have made and the way you have acted. The town will remember your courage, but I will remember your integrity." Samuel tipped his hat. "Thank you, Nayeli. It has been an honor to meet you and to witness the strength you carry. Your wisdom and resilience are remarkable. I am glad we met, and I am grateful for the trust you showed me." They stood for a long moment in silence, sharing a mutual understanding that words could not fully capture. There was no need for ceremony, no need for declarations or promises. Their connection had been built on respect, honesty, and shared experiences. Samuel's decision to refuse the town's offer had honored Nayeli's autonomy, and she had appreciated it deeply. In that moment, they both recognized that some bonds are formed through actions and principles rather than titles or obligations. As Samuel mounted his horse, the townsfolk watched in quiet admiration. Some nodded, acknowledging his courage and wisdom. Others whispered to one another, inspired by the way he had handled the shootout, the town's expectations, and his treatment of Nayeli. Samuel's departure was not just the leaving of a hero. It was a reminder to Red Rock that bravery could coexist with integrity, and that respect for others was as important as skill or courage. Samuel guided his horse through the town, moving past familiar buildings, the saloon, and the general store. The streets were lined with people offering quiet waves and nods of respect. He acknowledged them with simple gestures, knowing that his actions had already spoken more than words ever could. The children ran alongside him for a short distance, laughing and shouting farewell. Samuel smiled faintly, appreciating their energy and innocence, but he knew his path lay beyond the town, in the vast and open frontier. Once he reached the outskirts of Red Rock, Samuel paused to look back one last time. The town lay bathed in morning light, peaceful and safe, its people ready to continue their lives without fear of the gang that had once threatened them. Samuel felt a sense of accomplishment, not because he had gained recognition or reward, but because he had acted with honesty and integrity. He had saved lives, upheld his principles, and left the town in a better state than he had found it. As he rode along the trail leading away from Red Rock, Samuel reflected on the events that had unfolded. The shootout had tested his skill and courage, but the days that followed had tested his character. He had been faced with choices that required wisdom, patience, and moral clarity. By refusing the town's offer and respecting Nayeli's autonomy, he had demonstrated that true heroism involves more than physical bravery. It requires ethical decision-making and respect for the dignity of others. Nayeli returned to her home feeling empowered by the experience. Samuel's actions had shown her that strength is not only physical but also moral. She had learned that standing firm in one's principles, even when others expect something different, is a form of courage in itself. The people of Red Rock had witnessed these lessons firsthand. They had seen that tradition and customs could be honored without compromising respect, and that heroism could take many forms beyond acts of combat. As Samuel moved further along the trail, the landscape opened into rolling hills, distant forests, and wide plains. The frontier stretched endlessly before him, a place of opportunity and challenge. Samuel knew that life would continue to test him, presenting new dangers, responsibilities, and moral decisions, yet he felt prepared. The lessons he had learned in Red Rock, the importance of respect, integrity, and thoughtful action, would guide him wherever he went. Traveling alone, Samuel often reflected on the people he had met. Townsfolk of Red Rock had shown resilience and community spirit, while Naeli had demonstrated strength, intelligence, and courage. Their lives, though different from his, had intersected in meaningful ways, leaving an impression on each other. Samuel understood that true impact is measured not only by actions taken, but also by the influence those actions have on others. His presence had brought safety and guidance, but it had also inspired thoughtfulness and reflection among the people he left behind. As days turned into weeks, Samuel continued his journey through the frontier, encountering other towns and travelers. Each new experience reinforced the lessons he had learned in Red Rock. He treated everyone he met with respect, careful not to assume or impose. He used his skills to help those in need, always mindful that courage and moral integrity go hand in hand. Stories of Samuel's bravery and principled actions traveled ahead of him. People spoke of the cowboy who had saved Red Rock, who had refused to accept a woman as a reward, and who had treated an Apache woman with fairness and respect. His legend grew not only as a skilled fighter, but also as a man of integrity. Travelers, settlers, and other townsfolk admired him, not merely for his actions in combat, but for the strength of his character. Though Samuel continued to live a solitary life, his influence remained. Red Rock thrived, guided in part by the lessons learned from his presence. The townsfolk adapted their traditions, realizing that respect, consent, and ethical choice were as important as honor and recognition. Naeli became a respected member of her community, empowered by the acknowledgement of her autonomy and the examples set by Samuel's actions. Years later, travelers would recount the story of Samuel and the town of Red Rock. They told how a lone cowboy had faced danger with courage, protected a community, and made decisions guided by principle. They spoke of his respect for Naeli and his refusal to accept a reward that would compromise her freedom. The story endured, not only as a tale of skill and bravery, but also as a testament to integrity, moral courage, and the enduring value of respect for others. As the sun set on another day along the frontier, Samuel rode steadily across the open plains, feeling a sense of quiet fulfillment. He had faced danger, honored his principles, and respected the choices of others. His life would continue on the trail, unpredictable and challenging, but he carried with him the knowledge that true heroism is measured not just by the battles one fights, but by the integrity, fairness, and courage one shows in every decision. Samuel's story became more than that of a cowboy who saved a town. It became a story of human decency, a reminder that even in a harsh and lawless land, respect and ethical courage can shape lives and communities. And though he was alone on the trail, Samuel's legacy traveled far and wide, inspiring those who heard of him to act with bravery, wisdom, and honor in their own lives.